The sun beat down on the little town, turning the dirt road into a wavering mirage of heat. Emily pushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead as she bent to lift the sack of grain outside her family's feed store. The bag was heavier than she'd expected, and her boots dug into the dusty ground as she tried to drag it toward the doorway. Her arms ached, but pride kept her from calling for help. There was no one to call anyway. A shadow stretched across her, long and steady. Emily glanced up, startled, and found herself looking at a man in a wide-brimmed hat, dust coating his boots and travel lines written across his face. He didn't speak at first, only watched her with a calm steadiness that made her shift uneasily. "You look like you could use a hand, ma'am," he finally said, his voice low, carrying that slow cowboy drawl. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the softness beneath his ruggedness. She wanted to say no, wanted to prove she could manage on her own, but the sack tugging at her arm said otherwise. She nodded, stepping back just enough for him to take over. With a single effortless motion, he swung the grain up and carried it inside as if it weighed nothing. Emily's breath hitched, not at his strength, but at the quiet way he set it down, as though he respected the place more than most passing strangers would. "Thank you," she managed, brushing the dust from her hands. He tipped his hat slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Ain't no trouble." She studied him, noting the frayed edges of his shirt, the worn leather of his belt, the road etched into his stance. A drifter, she thought. The kind who passed through towns like Tumbleweed, never staying long enough for anyone to know more than his shadow. "Just passing through?" she asked carefully. His eyes flicked to hers, unreadable. "Something like that." Emily pressed her lips together, reminding herself not to wonder. Drifters never stayed, and she couldn't afford the luxury of curiosity. Still, when he stepped out into the sunlight again, she caught herself watching him longer than she meant to, the sound of his boots fading against the quiet street. The sun had slipped low behind the hills, leaving the sky streaked in gold and rose. Emily leaned against the porch rail of the feed store, the boards warm beneath her palms. The day had been long, and she was grateful for a rare moment of stillness until she noticed the cowboy again. He sat on the edge of the steps, his hat resting on one knee, a tin cup of water in his hand. The fading light caught the lines of his face, shadowing his eyes but softening the hard set of his jaw. He wasn't in any rush, just sitting there as though the weight of the world had finally given him permission to pause. "You don't have to sit out here," Emily said, folding her arms across her chest. "There's a bench inside the cafe." He gave a small shrug, his lips twitching with the ghost of a smile. "Cafe's too loud. This here's quieter." Something in his voice struck her, like a man who'd grown too used to silence, carrying it with him wherever he went. Emily shifted uncomfortably, then sat down a few feet away, surprising herself. She wasn't one for entertaining strangers, especially drifters, but there was something about him that wasn't easy to ignore. "Not many folks pass through without a reason," she said after a while. "You got business here?" He swirled the water in his cup, watching the light flicker off its surface. "Just needed a place to stop." "Been writing a long while." Emily raised an eyebrow. "And where does a long while end?" His gaze lifted to hers, sharp for a moment, then softened as if he'd thought better of an answer. "Nowhere in particular." She studied him, trying to read between the lines, but he gave her nothing. Still, she found herself talking about the store, how her father used to run it before he passed, how the town had grown quieter these past years, how she sometimes wondered if she'd made a mistake staying behind when so many others left. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice or empty words. He just listened, the kind of listening that made her feel like every syllable mattered. And when the sky finally deepened into indigo, he tipped his hat and stood. "Thank you for the water, ma'am," he said simply. Emily nodded, more reluctant than she wanted to admit. As he walked off into the dimming street, his figure fading into the glow of lantern light, a pang tugged at her chest. She told herself it was nothing, just a stranger passing through. But her heart, traitorous and quiet, wasn't so sure.